And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Social. I realized recently that I actually introduced social as raw. And then I went, I got to remember not to do that next time. And so I didn't do that this time. But it's funny how sometimes that happens, or the intro will end up cutting out mid sentence. This happened with you the other day. I think it was for Raw episode 83. Might have been 82, but I think it was 83, where as you were saying Dualistic Unity Raw, it cut out. And so we're on a black screen at the beginning of that intro. And so I just cut the audio from 82 where you said Dualistic Unity Raw. And then it continued on afterwards. And you can't tell unless you go back and you listen, you go, that sounds a lot like you did last time, in which case that is why for those two words, it sounds identical. It's a lot of fun doing that kind of thing. It's the same with splicing the videos and whatnot. It's nice to be able to put them together because sometimes there's a word where it's like half of it comes out right the first time, but then the second half of it comes out right the second time. And so you like put the two halves together and it makes a fully complete word. And nobody knows anything at all so long as you do it well. It's kind of fun.
That's awesome. I appreciate the everything you do with the clipping up and the editing there, because I know there can be times, especially with the shitty internet, or certain guests going on about certain things. It's helpful to have that. It's in there, but yeah, it's been a fun day for sure. We're things are moving pretty well here with everything going on.
Our
Dualistic
Netherlands
Unity,
retreat
so
is set to go.
fuck
This
yeah.
is super exciting. Oh my God. It's funny. I was talking to the lady at the bank because, of course, it's a sizable location. We actually had to do this through a bank transfer. We couldn't just pay it by credit card and whatnot. And of course, there's a European bank, and I live in North America. And so I had to go explain why we were paying for this. Because, of course, they're immediately suspicious it's some kind of scam or anything like that. I'm like, no, we've already done this once before, so on and so forth. I was talking to the lady about it. She's so stoked. She actually wants, she's like, I think I'd like to go to that. It's going to be this massive event. 34 community members. We have a wood-fired hot tub, which is so exciting to me. We're going to have a chef. I've reached out to Chef Caitlin to see if she'll be joining us again this time. I would love to see her there. And if not, of course, we do have other options. We're going to be hanging out. We're going to be having deep conversations. We're going to be going for walks. We're going to be laughing and being vulnerable and open with one another. And it's just going to be a big community event where we all get to recognize that we're all in this together a little bit deeper before we go back to the influence of our lives and the people around us who don't necessarily get what it is that we're experiencing. So it is nice that way. And of course, if anybody hasn't experienced a retreat with Dualistic Unity yet, there are going to be a few more chances. We have an event coming up, of course, this Thursday in Vancouver, but that's sold out. We also have an event in Vermont, August 24th. There is one ticket left for that event. You can actually join us. I will throw up the QR code for that in just a second here. And then we are thinking about having another event in October, beginning of October. And if not, then the next event is in the Netherlands. And that is a 9-day event. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have yoga, live music. It's going to be crazy.
Hell yeah. Netherlands is our next non-mini retreat, right? Like that's our next full week-long one. Yeah, so that's gonna be a blast. But yeah, I'm glad you got that in there, because oftentimes we forget about to announce all that sort of stuff and all the things that are going on, because there's just so much going on. So oftentimes we can't get it all in. But the retreats are a blast. They really are. They're a great time to just kind of separate yourself from the clock, from the schedule. I think that's at least been a massive component for me, is that we forget how tied we are to time via our measurement of change. Like we really do start to think that time is an actual thing that we're experiencing moment to moment, as opposed to just being something that moves through us as we are the moment. And it's merely a measurement tool, and without so much of that, because especially at the retreats, like we don't live by a clock. We don't have a set schedule. We don't have necessarily a set agenda. It really is just a bunch of cool people hanging out, figuring things out as they go, being willing to be free, be relaxed, let go of their assumptions about both themselves and everything around them. And so in that spot, like you're not measuring, you're not tracking the time quite so much. And you almost at least I've gotten a new perspective on time and how much of it is not lost, but just sped up by our tracking of it. Like we're so locked into it that we start to get a sense of what 24 hours feels like. But things shift when you're actually paying attention, relaxed in the moment that you're experiencing. And things do tend to slow down or they seem to as you're more attentive to the experience that you're having. And so without the tracking, with the, attention being paid, the state of relaxation, all those things, it really is a magical experience. So if you haven't checked one out, definitely check out the website and see what we got coming up.
It's so interesting how we're always talking about basically what our response is to change all the time. And most of the time, our response to change is resistance. We don't necessarily like it, or if it's happening, we want to form an opinion about it before we allow it to happen, or before we stop fighting it happening, or anything like that. But to embrace change, to actually just allow it to happen without opinion and preference and judgment, with faith in yourself, moving forward, all of that, basically just a state of being and presence. There's a bunch of words that you could use for it, but the point is that you're paying attention. And what's kind of magical about that, as that deepens, is that your experience of time becomes weirdly paradoxical. And what I mean is that there is so much change that has happened in my life in the last 2 years. So much change that has happened in our community and in Dualistic Unity, the podcast, everything that's happening. So much change. Like somebody was saying it the other day, just the fact that it's come this far in 2 years, less than 2 years, it's kind of crazy. Like we're about to have our fifth sold out retreat, going into our sixth in August, our seventh after that, and they continue to grow. And eventually we're going to have music festivals, and we're going to have all of that. And so there's all of this change, and yet, because you're embracing the change, because you're in it, you're paying attention to it, you're not rushing it, you're not trying to get somewhere, you are just embodying the change. Each and every day feels like a fucking eternity. It's awesome.
Yeah, because you're willing to be it, like be that change. As you said, like we don't we think we make change happen. We think we have to do something to make change. But the reality is that change is reality itself. And so as we try to do things, as we attempt to do things, it's like we're on that sort of flow of change happening, and then it's like trying to do it is reaching your hand out of the flow to reach for something that creates a friction and then slows the change and keeps you in the spot that you're at, and trying to make things change keeps you not stuck in a spot, but experiencing degrees of psychological suffering while you're being the experience itself. And so it's almost like we have it totally backwards when it comes to change, thinking that we have to do something to make it happen when you are it. And so not trying to do anything and just being willing to be it allows it to continue on. And so when things come up, even things like, feelings you don't really like so much, nervous feelings, anxious feelings, it's like that's a feeling that's passing through you and in that flow of change. And as you pick it out, like, I don't want that. I want to try to get rid of that. I need to get rid of that. I need to silence that. It's like all of this just it's like holding on to it because we don't realize that we are change itself because we maintain an idea, we maintain a story, we maintain all of this false certainty about what we are, how we fit in, who we know, what we're involved with, my opinion this, my opinion of that, my preference towards this, my preference towards that. And it just keeps us not stuck, but very, very resistant and constantly resistant to the change that we are because we want to be able to know what we are because we don't feel like we can trust ourselves to just let go and just allow things to keep happening and being involved, but not getting caught up in thinking that they should be any different or that you should be any different.
Right? And we're good with the change that we can accept. That we want. We want the change that we can accept. But it's the change that we resist that piles up and builds friction. And that's what all of the rest of it comes from. And then that little bubble of what we can accept gets closer and smaller, and it becomes more and more confining because it's harder and harder to appease. We have this great question here. Just curious, do you all feel like these attendees to these retreats have a diverse socioeconomic status, or is it hard for those in harder economic situations to access? Absolutely diverse. We are actually, we have one person who's already done this, and we encourage community members to do this. Create a crowdfunding page. If you would like the community to help chip in for a ticket to one of these retreats, we're happy to help promote that for you on the show, on our website, on our Discord community. We have one person in the community that's already done that. And we're happy to say that they have their retreat ticket for the Netherlands. So we're stoked about that. We also have a number of different types of rooms at this event, especially because it is such a large event. There are still some rooms on the third floor, which is 2 large shared rooms, 6 people, private bathroom in each one of those 2 shared rooms. Those rooms are going to get a chance to hang out with me and Andrew privately, separately from the rest of the group as well. Those tickets are actually only $2,000. And that includes all of your meals for the week, all of the quote unquote party favors in terms of substances and whatnot, and just a chance to hang out and be well fed and have a great time and do some karaoke and all of that. And it's only $2,000 for one of those tickets. So we really try and keep it reasonable. The larger we can make these events, the more reasonable it becomes. Likewise, as the podcast grows, this is something that we're very excited about, especially now that we've brought on a few people to work with us in terms of being an advertising sales agent. This is something that we're actually looking for right now. It's a commission-only position, but there's a lot of advertising space on our giant podcast of 250 plus episodes to sell. And as we start to sell that space, we're going to be able to actually fund these retreats out of some of our advertising revenue, which means we'll be able to drop the tickets even more, because the goal of these retreats is to bring the community together. We're doing that in any way that we can right now, and we're barely making ends meet in ourselves because we just started doing this full time less than 6 months ago, or about 6 months ago, something like that. So yeah, the point is to drop the tickets eventually as much as we can. We'd even like to get to the point where we can give some away, right? But we are not there right now. And so we appreciate the support of our community. And again, if anybody would like to help us in terms of building revenue for the Dualistic Unity community so we can eventually get to lowering those tickets, you can do so right here. There is a job position on our LinkedIn page. You can find out all about it. It's a commission-only position right now. Good commission. And of course, all you're doing is really looking for companies that have a product that doesn't make people feel like a bag of shit and add something to their experience, add something to the feeling of fulfillment that they already have in themselves. If you can find those companies, we want to advertise their product, in which case you reach out. They are looking for an audience like ours. They're looking for people like us, people who will value what they're doing and people who will trust those who are willing to act honestly. And so we're looking for good advertisers, and we're looking for good salesmen to look for those advertisers. And the whole point is so that we can bring the community together more and more often. Eventually, we want to have music festivals, as I said, and do a road trip and just have free events. We're doing a camping trip probably next summer. Those tickets are going to be very cheap.
Yeah, I like that with the advertisers, just products, companies that sell products that don't make you feel like a bag of shit. That's about it. That's about what we're going for. That enhance the life. But yeah, so there's a lot of shit going on, a lot of things, a lot of good shit. So a lot of growth happening, and so as we expand, we just want to be able to involve more and more of everyone, more and more of me, helping me. So yeah, it's exciting to see and kind of feel the shifts going on, and just being it just comes down to being you. Just comes down to being yourself, and the willingness to just understand that doing that and being in that spot. And it's not even a trust thing, because it's like, what what would you want more than being able to be relaxed? Like, what would you want beyond that? Because that then informs every experience that you have. Like, you can have equally as informative, equally as enjoyable of an experience, like walking down your driveway to get your mail, as your favorite thing to do in the world, because it's through you. Like, it's always your experience. And so as much as our environments have the potential to have impact on us, and it's not to say that there aren't certain situations that are inherently way more fucking difficult than others, there's still always the ability to respond how you would like to respond. Like, you are able to do that in any situation, no matter what, all the time. Like, if you can relax and not be quite so caught up in what something's going to mean about you, there's an ability to respond not in the right way, but it's through a state of not so much concern, and therefore the response is is relevant, but also not, in the sense that it's not relevant to you through concern, I guess, if that's making sense. But so anyway, that was a bunch of words, and I forget where I started.
That's okay. That's kind of the point of all this, though, is just to go through the motions, right? And I think that is the point, though, is we often have problems reconciling how you can care for something without necessarily being concerned about that thing. And it's the same way that you can care about your body, right? Like, you can go to the gym every day, you can eat healthy, you can do all that. You don't have to be sitting there on the brink of like terror, being terrified that you might get some disease. Some people are. Some people, that's why they exercise. That's why they care for their body, is simply for concern rather than for the appreciation of the body itself. Right. And it's when you start to appreciate the body that you really start to take care of it, in my opinion, which is why when you get sick, as you start to get healthy again, you're able to breathe and walk around. You're like, this is awesome. Often you end up working out a bit more, you start being a little bit more active. It's because you really appreciate that you can, and possibly that's the reset that you needed. But if you're doing it out of concern, you're actually creating more stress. And that's the paradox. Like, we actually can be doing something good for ourselves from the wrong state of mind that makes that good thing toxic, which is insane. It's the most interesting thing, because we don't have any way to compensate for that. We have no way to protect people from that. You see, like, we always want to introduce things like pharmaceuticals are good for you. Pharmaceuticals will help you regulate such and such and such and such. Unless you have an addictive personality, you need to identify, and you pass responsibility off to everything all the time. In which case, all pharmaceuticals are is another addiction. And the same is true on the other side of the fence when it comes to cannabis and psychedelics. And that's the argument that nobody wants to have. Everybody just wants to say one side good, the other side bad, right? Because one side is controlled. And that's a big illusion, I think, that we have about pharmaceuticals, regardless of the fact that it's pretty goddamn obvious this isn't the case. We actually think that pharmaceuticals, because they're controlled, because they're created, they're made by scientists in labs, that we assume we know everything that they do. But we know that's not the case. We understand that's not the case. That's why we have, or are supposed to have, years of trials, right? That's why when you hear an advertisement for a pharmaceutical, it says things at the end, may cause heart attacks, stress, anal leakage. Like, it may cause all these things. And they say may cause, because sometimes it does. And I know this. Okay, so I'm not just vilifying pharmaceuticals, because I use a pharmaceutical. I have pigment dispersion glaucoma, so I use eye drops to regulate the pressure in my eyes. I use cannabis as much as I can, so I don't have to use the eye drops, but they are still there, and they are still something that I use to maintain the pressure. That's all well and good. So you think to yourself, well, you see, Ray, look at that. Science, pharmaceuticals doing their job. Okay, here's the fun thing. And I know, because I've gone to specialists for years. I've had this condition for a long time, or rather, I've experienced this condition for a long time. They don't know why they work. I've asked this. I'm like, why do they bring your pressure down? We don't actually know. Oh, okay. What are the long-term side effects? Yeah, we're actually not sure of that either. Right? And it's because you can do trials, but for how long? Especially for a medication that is ongoing, right? You're going to do 3 months of trials and, oh, there's no observable side effects. So go ahead. What about 10 years? What about 20 years? Because some of these medications get used for a lifetime, right? And there are no trials for that. And so we kind of take it on blind faith, and we do this a lot. with a lot of things, right down to the point where a lot of medications, their last stage of trials is release into the public. That's their last stage of trials, is to release them into the public, to give them to doctors and then tell the doctors, what do doctors tell you when you go and you try out a new medication? If you experience any side effects, do let us know. That's what they're asking for. They're asking for the feedback for the company. That's the trial. The doctor's taking the feedback and then passing it on to the company based on the medication that they're trying out. You are a test subject. You don't even know, because the doctor is the one making the decision for you, because you're the one who put the doctor in a position where they're responsible enough to do so. That's why you signed for it.
Damn. So is that like well known? Like we're the last test subject? Like we're the last part of the test for the testing of new
It's
drugs?
not hidden knowledge. I mean, it's in the documentation for the FDA.
Damn. And I can hear arguments for it, like, oh well, whether it's the last or after the last, it's still after a number of trials, and so therefore it's like whatever. But like people just don't want to look at that. People think it's too big of a situation. And they're just like, I don't want to deal with that. It's I trust it enough. And it's not even like I trust it enough. It's just like I don't want to think about that.
I don't want to distrust it. I just don't want to distrust it, right? Like it's kind of like, and I found this fascinating, but this is very true. There's a website out there that'll help you find this. I don't know what it is, but it does exist. There are studies that go that say like, oh, there's evidence linking such and such to such and such, right? And you read about that in papers and articles and stuff like that, and there's like, aha, because those are the papers where the theory was proven correct, or rather, where there was a correlation between the theory and the evidence. Okay. What they don't show you is how many times that exact thing was done and not proven correct. And there are numerous studies where that's the case, and those papers never see the light of day, but they exist. They exist. And so you see the one out of maybe 6 attempts at this study that went like, yeah, there's evidence for that, but you don't see the 5 others that disproved it. And so we get influenced by this all the time in news articles all the time. A new study suggests such and such and such and such. And you just watch, and it's like, watch the word suggests. Because our belief is that no, they're scientists, they have control. And since I believe in control, therefore there is a way to know, objectively know, an answer to something, that there are experts. And we talked about this recently. We really just want to believe that somebody knows what the fuck is going on.
We really do. Like we really, really do. So we'll even make things up just to do it, just to believe it, just because I don't want to take responsibility and I don't want to recognize the responsibility that I have for whatever I'm doing. Like even whether it's pharmaceuticals deemed in a certain way or even just working out. Like the number of times I hear like, "Oh, just go work out. That'll be, from anyone." It's just like, that's physical health is mental health. Just go work out. It'll help your mental health. But if you're going into it, what people don't want to admit is that that's the action being done. And as you said, it can be done from a very great mentality, whatever, great subjective, whatever, doesn't matter, or a very toxic mentality of I'm going to work out as an expression of just feeling good and just being healthier. I know like doing weights helps my bones, stuff like that, versus I don't feel like enough and getting super shredded is going to make me feel like more. It's like, and I can like, cause I've had this conversation before, like people don't want to recognize that it can send someone in the other direction of the deep end. Cause they'll look at it and be like, oh, well, you know, they're looking healthier, like they're looking better. And it's irrelevant. I hear plenty of stories where people will say the best they've ever looked is the worst they've ever felt ever. So, but we somehow correlate that to feeling better, even though there isn't any degree of shifting away from a toxic mentality. And because there isn't control in that, because and there's no control in the sense that each and every individual is responsible for there are situations. So there is no thing that you can do that will guarantee anything ever, be it happiness or sadness, as a guarantee. But that means that the responsibility is always on you. Always, no matter what. There is no situation, there is no guideline of you should do this in a day to guarantee. You'd see it on Twitter, on Instagram sometimes, like 3 things to guarantee, having a great day. Wake up early, get sunlight, and drink a cup of water or something. And it's just another mechanism of control. And there isn't anything that you can put out there. No list of 3 things on Twitter where you can say, just do this and therefore this. But we want that so bad. Like, I want that so bad to just be able to look to something else. But then when you realize that you can't get that from anywhere else, then you have the opportunity to be free of that. And then that's freedom is what's left. So as much as we run to that and try and have that, it's like we're running away from freedom. It's like those guidelines, those things to follow become your prison walls. They become the bricks in the cell, or the fucking gates. Each gatepost is they're the things that we hold on to, the structures that we hold on to throughout our day. Not saying that there's something inherently bad with structure, but it's how seriously you take it. And yeah, and the things that the feelings of control, the feelings of a guarantee is what shackle us. Because each time we do that, it's like we're passing responsibility onto something else.
And the alternative is just awareness. That's it. That's the alternative is awareness here and now. And that's when you start doing different things in your life. Like, give you an example, and I've used this example before. I used to exercise for egotistical reasons. When I stopped exercising, it was because I wasn't driven as much by egotistical reasons. But then I was like, well, why exercise? And I put it off because I was very, very invested on the other side of things, as anybody who's listened to our podcast knows. But over time, you exercise awareness, you're like, I can actually feel that in my body. Like, I can feel that in my body. So now all of a sudden I'm doing things because I can feel them, because it makes sense to me, rather than it's something I should do. And ever since then, my exercise has become totally different in terms of tone. Like, what I mean is, like, I'll exercise, but it's for the feeling of what I'm doing. It's not for how many reps I'm doing or how much I lift or any of that shit. None of that matters. None of it matters whatsoever. But like, I'll take a day and just stretch, because that feels like the right thing to do today. I don't have a schedule. I don't have a routine. I don't have any of that shit. I let my body basically call the shots. So the exercise is just awareness. The exercise is just slowing down, quieting down, and listening to myself long enough to hear what it is I'm really saying, because we are our bodies. There's no mind body disconnect. That's such a fallacy. Like, there's no disconnection between your mind, the person and the awareness that you are, and your body. Your body is reflective of your mind, which is why when you're stressed, your body gets tense.
That's yeah, I'm starting to get a better understanding of just that, and the willingness to feel certain things. Like, even with little tweaks, there's almost like a discomfort that comes with it. And so we don't want to look at it because we want to avoid the discomfort. But by not looking at it, we're not paying attention to it and seeing maybe where it's coming from. And so we just, and we do that with situations in our lives as well, but specifically with the body. It's like something feels uncomfortable, rather than deepening our attention into that, recognizing that the pain or the tweak or the pull on something is indicative of something. We just look at it for what it is, and we're like, I don't like that. And then it's like we mentally suppress it in a sense, and avoid it. And I had kind of an interesting thing that wasn't like an immediate response to something. But anyway, yesterday, so I'm kind of have to like run every day for this marathon training and stuff, which it's like I'm learning a lot, even just with the mental side of when I don't want to run 10 miles and, I'm at mile 5 and I'm like, I could stop right now and walk and that would be equally as reasonable as continuing to run, but it's an option to continue as well. But with so yesterday I noticed something like in my hamstring was like kind of tight, and then kind of separate from that, because I wasn't really thinking about that. I was just looking at some stats, and I have an Apple Watch, and one thing apparently that people like to look at is cadence, which is basically the steps per minute that you have. And because I always had long strides when I would run and when I would sprint, when I was younger, and like in baseball, my strides were always very long. And so I have a really low steps per minute. And I noticed that my cadence was very low. It should be like a lot higher. So today I ran and I didn't take as long of strides. I was taking much shorter strides, and like everything felt better on my entire body. And so it was interesting that it was like I was feeling, so my hamstring felt better from doing that, because I realized like, fuck, you take really long strides, it's like that's way more impact every time. And so to me, I feel like I'm shuffling like a fucking penguin right now. Meanwhile, I'm probably taking normal steps, but it was just kind of interesting that like my attention was on that and I was focused on my hamstring. And then it was kind of like, to me, seemed like a quote unquote separate thought, where I was like, I'm going to look at some of these things and cadence, whatever, look into that. And then it led to kind of learning that. So it was like this whole path that I didn't, until you were just talking, didn't even realize that that progressed in that way. But it's interesting how often things like that are probably happening that we're just not attuned to, if not, you know, every single moment, like we talked about in that synchronicities community topics episode.
We see what I like about this is that there's another lesson in the fact that you're running a marathon, right? Which means that immediately your brain's like thinking of the end result, thinking about the distance in between, and wants to hurry up. It wants to create a bigger pace to feel like it's doing more, right? But with a marathon, you have to practice more patience. It's not about trying to get there fast. It's about trying to get there as efficiently as possible, which means energy conservation. And so you have to rewire all of that. Your brain's immediately like, gotta eat up the ground, gotta get this done, right? And your body's just going to listen to that based on your mentality, right? And that's often why when we're younger we do get injured, is because we go beyond what our body's telling us we can do, because we're like, no, I can do it, and this is why, famous last words is, hey, watch this.
Oh, exactly. And even when it comes to running, like that was definitely a component of my identity I built when I was younger, because I was always very fast and I was like growing up fastest kid like in my grade for a while. And so there is, and including like when we would do even in elementary school, like track and field stuff and run the mile, I was like always had to be first. I was like I was going to be first no matter what. And so I'm used to with running, because I haven't run distance wise in a while, that like I'm kind of remembering that, like the desire to keep progressing in that sense, but then it's coming from a place of like proving something. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with like continuing to try and beat yourself, but it's been kind of interesting balancing that, because with the longevity, even not even in the marathon specifically, like on that day, but the longevity of just training for something over months and months and months, and to be able to see the natural progression has been cool, because I notice like my heart rate is a lot lower just when I do jog and when I go on jogs, or even just like on a walk or something. Like I think I'm just probably in better shape, but it's also a lesson in patience, because there's a big part of me that wants to every single run, like beat my last time or beat my last pace. But then it's also, you push too hard, you get hurt, because you're focused. You're not focused on the experience that you're having. You're focused on doing something for some ulterior motive. And so your legs don't feel like you're not as attuned to your body as you're experiencing it. And so as you continue to push and push and push and push and push, focused on something outside of just being very involved in the experience that you're having, you're inevitably going to get hurt in some way, shape, or form, because you're not remaining attuned to that. And so it's been a kind of cool practice in that too. Just like it's okay to take it easy. And even though there's a part of me too that knows like, well, yeah, but I could finish like way faster if I just ran faster the whole time. But yeah, so it's just, yeah. And the willingness to kind of each mile stay the same pace instead of, starting out hot and then fucking burning out, even though, maybe you want to run a lot harder in the start. And by you, I mean me.
And it's really funny. I don't know. Have you run a marathon this long before?
No.
No. Okay.
Farthest I've done is half marathon.
So let's just say that you do this, what you're going to do, but then after the fact, you're like, I'm going to do that again. And so let's just say for the next, say, I don't know, 40 years of your life, you decide you're going to run a marathon as often as possible. That's still not a lot of marathons if you think about it. Like when you really look back and you're like, maybe I ran 100 marathons and that's when I was really trying to run them, right? And you look back at your life in your 80s or your 90s and you look at those times that you had the chance to do this and it felt so good to accomplish those goals. Like, why not take your time? Why not chew up each and every moment and just be like, yeah, especially considering that's what it's for. Like, that's what it's for. Nobody's behind you going, move, man. Like, nobody's doing that. So why would you? I mean, this is an experience that's going to change your life. It's changing you now as you train for it. Allow it to change you as you go through it. But we get so caught up in like the thing and then getting the thing done that it's the doing of the thing that is what's changing you. That's the process of change. And this is what I was saying. Like, it changes everything. You're winning just by being there. Whereas other people look at it as like, it's kind of like a race. It's like, it's not, unless it's against yourself, right? Or some other asshole who thinks like that. But even that's against themselves. And I mean, so yeah, look at these moments because one day you're going to look back at them and they're going to be some of your fondest memories. And you're going to think to yourself, why the fuck did I run so fast?
Well said. Yeah, that actually helped me just put it in perspective more so because even the thought of being older and thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I'm sure the day will be a lot of fun and stuff, but like a lot of the memories will be in training for it. And even like fucking this will now be a memory, this conversation of just where I stopped thinking about it as like this siloed sort of training and more like just an experience to be had and kind of like each run and experience within the experience of training, within the experience of, being more relaxed, letting go, and just kind of it all informing itself. Because you look back and you remember the build up just as much as any of the days and like, you interact with people. Like when I was able to get to New York last week, was able to run with some people and like those wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started training for this, doing the fucking even how I've been feeling the last couple of days, very relaxed, like as a product of me joining a team for the marathon, having to raise money for them, thinking about like, oh, I'm gonna start doing some running videos. And then my friend Tim started telling me about how he takes gummies on runs, and I was like, oh, I should try that, getting more involved with cannabis, smoking a little more. And then so I tried it and filmed the first one I did, and then people liked it, and then went fucking crazy and took 5 a couple days ago, and it was jarring as shit. But it's coming out of that, it definitely made a mark. And so you can go on and on and on about the impacts of different things and different things happening and the dominoes falling for eternity. And you come back to just seeing the vitality and the depth and the beauty of the experience you're having is like in the perfection of the dominoes falling. It's like, this is the one you're seeing, this is the one you're being, being the domino, pivoting in whichever direction you feel like going, and how deeply you can recognize that you are that, and how much sway that has, not in any controlling way, but just in your ability to see yourself.
It's interesting, right? It's so funny. Like, you spend all your time trying to get somewhere, and then you realize the best thing you can possibly do for your life as a whole is be as fully where you are as you can all the time, because that's where things are happening. Isn't it funny? We want to get an influence over our life, but we look to the future. That's not where your life is. Your life is here. This is where things are happening, but that's kind of why we do it, because if we look to the future, that we can go, well, I can change that. It doesn't require any immediacy. There's no urgency to changing yourself now. Right? That's why we often want to look to the future. Right. And there's that sense of control. I wanted to mention we only have a few minutes left here. We're going to be taking a break for about 15 minutes, and we're going to be coming back twitch.tv/dualistic unity, or you can check us out on YouTube Live. It's our call-in show today. So if you have a question, you can call in. You can join us on the episode for up to 10 minutes. We will release the link that you can do that with as the episode starts going. So for about 15 minutes, just chill. Come and join us over at Twitch, interact with the community. Definitely, if you haven't as yet, join our Discord. Our Discord is almost at 1,000 members, and the conversation is always growing. We're looking for more and more people who are just on the path to being themselves, which means that if you are learning to relax, if you're facing anxiety, if you're wondering if who you think you are is really who you are, then this is a conversation you're likely going to enjoy. Jump on our Discord. It's totally free, and there's a lot of people who want to talk to you. You may not think so, but they do.
Well said. I know we got like 1 minute left here, but I'm very excited for the call-in show and to continue on with this conversation and that whole striving for the future, allowing you to avoid the responsibility, but also just like running from yourself and you don't even know that you're running from freedom the whole time, trying to grab onto some sense of control because you just don't want to stop and look at yourself and be good with where you're at and what you are. But anyway, call-in show.
Absolutely. This has been a fun conversation for sure. Everyone, thanks for joining us. If you haven't yet, jump on our Patreon call or our Patreon campaign, patreon.com/dualistic unity. We do group chats 5 days a week, which means you can just chat with us instead of being on an episode or anything like that. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can actually just chat with us. If you have a question, including the question I just saw go by in the chat, which I'm not going to address right now, you can ask that in a group chat. And there's a 7-day free trial, and it's all private. None of it sees the light of day, so you can feel as comfortable as you want to in discussing as much as you would like to. So that's all for right now. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.